Watchmen, the end is nigh. This game, made for PC, Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, was focusing in on the titular characters Rorschach and Night Owl. Being released together with the movie based on Alan Moore's book, this game would follow a bit of a different storyline. Rorschach's traumatic and troubled past, which left him traumatized from sexual deviance, made him step to Owlman for support. This was after he was sent on a mission to find a missing underage girl. Who sent him? This was by her parents, who also had evidence that she was abducted and had her mind broken into being a working girl. Social engineering, we call that with a pretty word. And it's most unfortunate that this concept can be applied to many things in this world. They discover that Lady Twilight is responsible for the abduction and sexual misconduct with a minor, who just became 18 by the way. Owlman says there's nothing they can do now. Then the game has two possible endings. You can fight as Rorschach, or you can fight as Owlman. Owlman turns out to be a degenerate who at one point shared a bed with Lady Twilight, just as Rorschach was out of town. Now depending on which character you selected, or perhaps if you're playing with a friend, you'll have to fight against each other. If you pick Rorschach, you finish off Lady Twilight. If you picked Owlman, you beat Rorschach down the same window that Lady Twilight would fall through, but Rorschach has the skills to dissipate and disappear, unlike Lady Twilight. Now, I've never seen anyone in their right mind pick Owlman, simping over a groomer while discarding your homies. This game predicted simp culture, which is participated in by many beta males. Also, the last chapter of the game is fought in a mansion where you notice that the police force, as well as many authority figures, indulge themselves within the same circuit as the sex traffickers. Gee, I wonder where I've heard this before. Ironically enough, a clue in the image that the characters follow, primarily in part 2, has the text Treasure Island in it, just like in Pinocchio, which foreshadowed a certain particular other island which we all know of nowadays. Anyhow, if there's a big missed opportunity they had was that they at one point encountered an entire closet with film reels. If they looked into that, then there might have been a little bit more evidence sufficient to charge this woman with, and the story would not have been two-dimensional. It's still good, it's still overlooked, the combat is still a little bland if you think about it, but honestly that's also a little bit the responsibility of the player, to use creative combinations of button mashing. So that's the subplot for part 2, but part 1 has primarily the subplot that two journalists have been kidnapped because they were going against the grain and the culture set by the elite in the universe of Watchmen, which is definitely why this freaking franchise is amazing, because sometimes that's what happens, and if they don't get kidnapped, they get their tongues cut out if they say something that's against the narrative that's usually set by the elite who are in charge and in power. Also, there is a character named Underboss who has been suspicious and is deemed to be the perpetrator, but he turns out to be innocent, and that's probably why he keeps on attacking our main two protagonists. That's kind of poor writing if you ask me, but whatever. Also, there's an NPC which looks like Dragon Lord. Anyways, that was that for this entry. Also, why the hell do I keep on calling Night Owl Owlman? Probably because he reminds me of the counterpart of evil Bruce Wayne. Who's Lila? In this indie horror game from 2022, you play as William Clark, who was a co-conspirator in the disappearance of a few classmates. Lila is seen as some sort of demonic entity which possesses him. It can also be seen for the true ego or self. But if you ask me, it kind of reminds me of American Psycho, where the main character has an alter ego based on his mother, who makes him thirst after the blood of the innocent. Personally, I think it's fascinating to think about what psychology brings to the equation. It really feels like his true self or some sort of entity is trying to take over, for his expressions automatically change to something which, to the context sometimes, is quite menacingly evil. The surreal atmosphere of the game really focuses in on a narrative which is exploring of memory, identity, guilt, and the ending as William faced the consequences of his actions, or the actions of the entity which took him over. Alan Wake. Alan Wake is a story about a writer who is suffering from a dilemma. He's failing to manifest anything new, as he is suffering from burnout. Throughout 2 years he didn't manage to write his new book, which is why his wife, Alice, takes them to Bright Falls, a holiday destination for them, which is used as an outflight so Alan can get his creative juices flowing again. However, what he didn't know was that his wife set up an appointment with Dr. Hartman, a doctor who is apparently running a clinic which specializes in the help of artists, primarily for self-enrichment. The game starts off in a dream, where an everlasting darkness is trying to take over the world. The only safe place is the lighthouse. We also see a billboard in the background of Alan and his creative works being torn apart by a tornado. The tornado obviously being a manifestation of his crafts of art. Being a hitchhiker he ran over in the dream, who came out of his own story. Another character named Thomas Sane, who represents the light as well, visits him in this dream. Thomas is warning him about the darkness, that it's about to take over the world. As Alice and Alan arrive on the ferry, and Alan is picking up the keys to their loft. A witch which took over the face of Thomas Sane, his old lover, Barbara, tricks him into going to a lake, where Thomas too was trapped by the dark presence. After Alan hears that Alice set up an appointment with Dr. Hartman, Alan loses it and goes outside to catch a breath. Since Alice has the fear of darkness and the lights go out, Alan knows there is something wrong, as he tries to rush inside as fast as he can, but alas, Alice is being dragged down into the lake by a dark presence. Before Alan knows it, he wakes up behind the wheel of his crashed car, as he has to try to make his way throughout the forest to the gas station to get help. On his path to the gas station he encounters many so-called Taken, which are people who are possessed by the darkness. You can also see this through a metaphorical lens. When someone is insane, others look insane, others look like they lost all the light within them. Alan realizes he lost a week. Within this week, he wrote a manuscript. This manuscript appears to be coming true, despite of it being from a higher force he had no control over. This can also be seen through a metaphorical lens, as people being corrupted by the scriptures that they were given throughout their entire life, not questioning it, not being able to see the strings which move their arms, and never questioning their role in society. If I were to break down the entire story, I'd be sitting here for hours, so I'm just gonna give you a quick breakdown. At one point, Alan wakes up in Dr. Hartman's clinic. This could be the part where Alan truly wakes up and becomes lucid. If Alan truly was delusional, this would indicate that at the end of the story, he would end himself. However, since there were plans for a sequel for so many years, one of them being turned into American Nightmare, which once upon a time had the codename Night Springs, a TV show inside the Alan Wake universe, which usually asks quite philosophical questions, lingering at the edge of perception. There are many layers which create depths in the world of Alan Wake, one of them being Alan seeing himself on TV while he was in the dark place, inside of the lake. Another one is a local radio show named The Night Owl, from presenter Pat Main, and another one is the manuscript pages that you find throughout the game. There are many questions who still linger, like who wrote who into being? Was it Thomas Sane who wrote Alan into being to set him free and protect the world against the darkness? Or was it Alan who wrote Thomas Sane into being, or the entire world he manifests within? Alan Wake 1 also has 2 special episodes where his memories turn against him, as well as where he is being split up into 3, one being his higher self and the other one being his shadow self, which he must reunite with. In Alan Wake American Nightmare you fight against his dark counterpart, in some sort of Groundhog Day ritual, even though in Alan Wake 2 it turns out that whoever was wearing Alan's face was committing horrible deeds, while Alan his conscious was asleep. So the in-universe spin-off American Nightmare? Wow, someone really wants to die in traffic tonight. So American Nightmare and Alan Wake 2 can still have the same synopsis, or conspiracy that Alan is suffering from psychosis. Also, Alan Wake 1 was really ahead of the curve since it was released in 2010 and it was already mentioning police brutality, you know, a sheriff with a shiny badge. But Alan Wake didn't make it racist, like other groups. It also illuminated how some men will always see women as the victim, even when it's a genderless issue, sometimes accusing a man of doing something wrong, while it was just a misconception. Or in this case, the dark presence, which is also metaphorical, took over a girl named Rose, who poisoned Alan and his friend Barry. The Wolf Among Us. The Wolf Among Us is a Telltale game from 2013 which follows Bigby Wolf, a reinterpretation from the Big Bad Wolf from the Grimm fairy tales. In this reality, however, we see the consequences of the fairy tales, after the characters were extradited from their homelands and brought into our reality, to New York, which I wouldn't do nowadays. Hell nah. They might be killed for performing quote-unquote magic. In this choice-driven story game, you'll figure out quickly that there's someone pulling the strings behind the entire town. Someone named the Crooked Man, who rules by fear, who got himself into a position of power. He's got your boss in his pocket, he's got the local pimps in his pocket, he's got the magic industry in his pocket, which allows fables to turn into human, since in this universe characters who cannot transform into a human-like entity will use glamours in order to pass off as real humans. Interestingly enough, what we saw in The Wolf Among Us is a small scale of what we've seen through the last years in, you guessed it, DC was trying to tell us once more about powerful elites who hoard all the money, who hoard all the power, and force everyone under them into a system which they do not desire to be in, yet get in line for because everyone keeps each other in line and I was just doing my orders. Besides, it's the only thing I know. Most entities are creatures of habit. What led to all of these discoveries? A murder mystery, where Georgie, the pimp, took two prostitutes out, the Crooked Man using words such as, "You take care of it," and using people their weakness against them. Beauty and the Beast being of old money yet not knowing how to invest their money well, forcing Beauty to take on an extra job, secretary at the working girl's office. And Beast? As well as Beast, trafficking magic illegally, obviously all under the working lines of the Crooked Man himself. Big B's boss, Ichabod Crane, turning his sick little fantasy into a LARPing game where he hires working girls to take the role of Snow White. Big B's terrible cigarettes even having a presence, for they play a psychological role, the Ichabod always having Snow around, as well as Big B always being exposed to his brand of cigarettes, internalizing this in Ichabod's mind, linking it to Snow as well. As soon as one bad person gets into power, everyone under them will be forced into a role they do not desire to be within. Then again, sometimes others, their lies can also make one do not desire a role they did desire beforehand, because psychologically they've been talked out of it by being convinced that a bad person is in charge. It's always important to do research about the person in question, yada yada yada. As well as research about the researchers too. Who watches the Watchmen and are they part of a bigger cahoots? And is the Crooked Man pulling on the strings? Also, there's a scene with a kangaroo court where your actions do have consequences for the court itself. You can save a prince, which if you don't take him as a priority and first choice, will pass away. However, what disappoints me truly of the ending, sad that in the court they didn't have a magic mirror to help them out with finding facts and details. Yoink. Anyways, you do see elements within some of the characters, such as Bluebeard, who actually works for the same establishment as Bigby Wolf, the main character, that he actually has the elements inside of him to be just as much of a crook and violent as the Crooked Man or the World Boss. Within many of us are elements of a true and different nature. We all carry many faces. Sometimes this will expose a different side of us to what others are used to. Injustice Gods Among Us. Injustice Gods Among Us? Fun fact, this game was banned in the Arab world because they used the word God in the title. Now, why is that so offensive? Mohammed worship definitely isn't a fascist ideology that has an almighty yet super insecure god whose scriptures get cherry-picked. Injustice Gods Among Us is a story about how justice is fragile and how heroism can vanish and vaporize by just a few mistakes, even when the hero itself got corrupted. Sometimes you cross a line and you're not able to return. It also returns to the old wise saying from Uncle Ben, and I do see on a regular basis that when people see something on television and are led to believe it, that they do not just unbelieve it. It's permanently there, and also obviously reference to absolute power corrupting absolutely. Yes, in this timeline, the Joker uses fear toxin of the Scarecrow as well as kryptonite in order to make some sort of kryptonite fear toxin, creative name, in order to poison Clark/Superman and make him launch Lois Lane with his unborn child into deep space, as well as destroy the entirety of Metropolis. It's kind of crazy if you ask me, because one punch would be enough to finish the job, if you catch my drift. So that's probably why we start off with the aftermath. The story also glimpses over authoritarianism versus freedom, as well as justice and control. Would you rather have security or liberty? And do the ends justify the means? The story also glimpses over alternate universes before that was like a hot thing, even though it was always a thing already in DC Comics. And obviously it's also about how context shapes morality. Nier. In this game, which focuses on existential dread, you play as 2B. Basically like a MILF. You also have a little fanboy following you, 9S. Damn, he's adorable. Wait, what? So this game particularly focuses on identity and self-awareness, as well as free will and finding meaning within existence, even when your prime directive turned out to be a massive lie. Within the story of Nier, there are cyborgs modeled after humans, who try to secure a living facility and space back on Earth for humans who have been hidden on the moon. But as it turns out, all of the humans were already extinct. We also see in this universe that despite of humanity being gone, nature once again takes over. And that is a fact that we shall always have to exist with. Even if we destroy nature temporarily, it will only destroy ourselves. Nature will recover eventually. There's also a part of the story which has normal robots who were not modeled after humans become quote-unquote disrupted. 9S doesn't really seem to know what he'll have to do with it because of his built-in prejudice. He can't really help the robots quote-unquote dysfunction. The more they start to see that there's more beyond their normal coding which they cannot uphold anymore because there's no use. It's basically, if I can compare it to anything, it's Skynet after all humans are gone, but not as networked as Skynet would attempt to be. As a sequel, I'd like to see them use human flesh to create human clones and then, naturally, be full on disappointed with the results because human nature is contradictive to say the least. Also, I love how astonished 9S always is when he sees life forms. He's such a good boy. Endless Ocean. Endless Ocean is a sequel to the classic Wii title, carrying the same name of course. The classic one, however, was most well known for its very extremely deep rift, which really made people question their significance in the universe. It's also interesting and fascinating to note that this game goes into details about our ecosystem, as well as many underwater natural phenomena. It's very educational despite not all of the fish being real animals. Then again, perhaps maybe, since we are quite ignorant of what is in these oceans under us, they either say that art is based on life or life is based on art, but sometimes, just as with the invention of the telephone, there are just many individuals who come with the same inventive idea. They walk next to each other, may it be within a parallel universe or whatnot. I myself would consider me to be someone who would reinvent the wheel. Why get a fish daily when I can teach myself how to make a rod? It's always nice to have things and ideas handed to you, but that doesn't mean that you can come up with them yourself. I'm just trying to say that Endless Ocean is quite the nice game for existential dread. It's not the deepest, I mean maybe literally get it because you're in the ocean. Anyways, I think that's enough of that one. Thank you for listening to my buffoonery. Zombie games. You're quite familiar with this trope already probably if you're an avid gamer, or if you've got exposure to television. I would like to see this as a metaphor for the endless waves of humans who just take what's on television for granted. Even the mainstream media is like Sesame Street for adults. I can give you a very fine example. Nowadays we have stigmas and stereotypes which are illuminated because they might rhyme with the past slightly because of one thing they shared with whatever sort of like extremist party was there back then. Well, at least I haven't been reconditioned like Nazis back then, thinking about Jews like they're the worst thing in the book, by now thinking about Nazis they're the worst thing in the book, because it's so easy to just call everyone you disagree with a Nazi. Just stop. Thinking is hard, and compassion is very difficult to give.
A black judge let me get away 40 times with my crimes because I'm a victim of the system, and then I saw a white girl in the subway and I just knew I had to stab her in the neck.
Sorry guys, I'm getting a bit too carried away in my role acting, my method acting. Anyways, yes, I do think that most people are somewhat zombie-esque, with the information descending onto them beforehand, being censored and edges being cut so they'll never know the full truth. Always grasp in the dark, but they don't know because it's not like they're able to see in the dark, like their eyes have adjusted well. But one thing I can say for sure, once you open your eyes you cannot unsee. Thank you very much. Spec Ops The Line. Now you're probably already familiar with this game because of Chapter 8, where our main character blows up a refugee camp, including American soldiers who were there to help. This game goes over the horrors of PTSD, as well as delusions of the primary character. Perceive the story how it was on the inside of his own head. Now I know it's very easy to blame America with acts of horror and terror in the Middle East, but it's definitely not America who forces women to get cut down there, and it's definitely not America who forces gays to be thrown off of buildings there. And it's also not America who forces decapitation of people who do not believe in specific ideologies and religions. It's not America who destroys fundamental pieces of history of the Middle East. It's not America who does a lot of things, and I think it's very intellectually dishonest if you put all of the blame on America. Did you know Dubai has millions of slaves from countries like India who get their IDs confiscated once they get there for a job, and then need to pay gigantic fees in order to get them back? Interestingly enough, this game has 3 different endings. One has you being shot by the colonel you tried saving and blamed for a part of the game as well, for all of the death and destruction. Another ending has you end yourself, and another ending has you shoot the colonel, which is supposed to be one of your delusions. Anyway, sorry I went a little bit off script. You don't hear that often, so go subscribe and smash the like button because I serve truth, I serve justice, I love you and I love everyone around me. By saying the truth, by speaking what's on my mind instead of filtering myself out in favor of political correctness, eradicating my spine, exchanging my dick for a pussy. I'm not gonna do that. Anyways, thanks for listening in, guys. Love you.